All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd be interested in how many of you were or joined us yesterday for Irene Heffel's session. And it was wonderful to interact with you during that as well. That was a great session. So today, Rosalind and I, and we'll introduce ourselves in a couple of minutes, are going to focus this session on new curriculum areas in literacy. So this is grades 4 to 6. Linked to, embedded, Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being. And we've really made the focus of this session around picture books. So, and other literature, I should add that because there's some other really amazing resources. But you'll notice, oh, and I should copy it. I have already put the link to the slides in the chat, but I'm going to post that again because I know if you come in after I post it, you can't see it. So I'll post that again. So you do have access to these slides, and I did have someone say that they could get in and access it. So that's fairly important. But feel free to open that if you want to now, or you can copy it and keep it to look at later. All right, so let's get going. So I'd like to just begin by acknowledging that this is an ARPDC institute this week. So that acronym stands for Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortia. And there are 7 of us across Alberta, so 7 consortia. And it's been amazing how the consortias have come together to offer this week of PD. So we just wanted to acknowledge that teamwork. And speaking of acknowledgement, we also, as you won't be surprised, really want to acknowledge the land. So I thought that I would just share this quote by Beverly Hungry Wolf. And in the bottom, you'll see the green square, but it says, "This land has to be acknowledged. The people who take care of this land for a long time have to be acknowledged. At least find the truth about us." And I really found that impactful. And I think it led to what I've heard several times, which is make the acknowledgement personal, make it applicable, really share something that is going to be meaningful and not just reading from a slide. So what I wanted to do today, given that we're going to be talking about literature, and given this is a grade 4 to 6 presentation for the grade 4 to 6 curriculum, I wanted to share a book, and I believe this would be an amazing, you could do it as a read aloud, you could do it as a book club option, which I think would be really interesting. And if you're interested in book clubs in your classroom and how to do them, Penny Kittle has some amazing free resources online. And maybe when Rosalind is doing her part, I can just search up one of her Padlets. But anyhow, it would be a great book club book. So this book was written by Christian Allaire. He is Indigenous, and he talked about in an interview, which I actually included in the speaker notes at the bottom of the slide, if you want to listen to this interview through CBC Radio. But he talked about the fact that when he was young and trying to find himself in terms of fashion, he was always really hesitant to reflect his culture, and he wasn't sure how it would be perceived. He didn't really know enough about it. He shares that, he wished he had seen others who would have been role models for him in this area. So this book is for 11 to 15, 16-year-olds, but very applicable to grade 4 to 6 in terms of how fashion and beauty can be used to reclaim culture. And as we go through our books today and we look at the learning outcomes in terms of ELAL in grades 4 to 6, you will see a lot of alignments in terms of how this book could be applicable. And so it's something I just thought would be a great acknowledgement of the land and the First Peoples. And I did want to add here, including the Métis, the Inuit, and all other ancestors who have made this territory their home. So I hope that book is something you might look into. All right, so I'm going to ask Rosalind to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I am Rosalind Schneider. I guess I was an instructional coach with Golden Hill School Division, and I will be moving into an associate principal role this fall. I am Métis from Region 2. I grew up north of Vermilion. I saw some people that said they were from Vermilion and Lloydminster, so that's more where I'm from. Yeah, and I'm very excited. Kim and I have tweaked this presentation many times, I think, over the last year for different grade levels and have done different work. I'm currently in my master's for school leadership as well through the University of Alberta. So thanks for everyone for making time to be here today to extend your learning. That means a lot. So
thank you, Rosalind. And my name is Kim Tackaberry. I'm with the Calgary Regional Consortium. And my areas of focus are literacy and inclusive education. And I too am taking my master's at Queen's University in literacy. And so Rosalind and I have had some great conversations about being master students and working full time. And I'm sure others in our virtual space can relate to that. So we formerly a grades, I've taught grades K to 9, but did spend a lot of time with grades 7 to 9 in a specialized school for children with learning disabilities. So let's move on. So what I would like to just give you some insight into in terms of this session is we really want the beginning to be foundational knowledge, just where Rosalind will share some resources, but also just some really impactful information around Indigenous ways of knowing and doing. And then our application piece, which will be looking at the Alberta curriculum, the new ELAL curriculum, and looking at how you can align it specifically to using Indigenous picture books. And then we will close with some takeaways. And again, Rosalind will share some really robust resources that you can dig into to do some planning in this way on your own. And I think that's our plan. So we'll move forward. We do want to start, and this worked brilliantly when we did this session in June. And what we want to do is invite you into the slide deck. So I'm going to copy and paste the link again. And we want to invite you to share with us, what grades do you teach? Sorry, I'm trying to exit. What grades do you teach or will be teaching this coming year? And what wonderings do you have about our topic today? So I wrote the grades I taught, and you already heard that. And then my question is, how do I respectfully, as a white settler, share Indigenous ways of knowing and doing with my students? So any questions you may have, this starts on slide 7, but you'll notice you can go to slide 7, slide 8, 9, 10. We've got a lot there. Pick whichever one you like. And this has really not only guided this session, but every time we pull from it to revise and update our session moving forward. So it's really helpful and may not be something that we capture in depth here. We will definitely try, but we can't promise that we'll get to everything. But it's such a great stepping stone for us to embed or create future sessions. So I'll stop talking, and this is where Rosalind and I read really quickly.
this is where I get super excited.
Yeah,
I go off on tangents and then we're crunched for time. So I'll try to not do that.
No, it's always They're always good tangents.
Yeah.
And if you just popped into our space, I'm going to copy again, give you the link to the slide deck, and feel free to join us on slides 7 through 10 to let us know. Your name is optional, by the way. I should have said that. My apologies. But the grade you teach and what are your wonderings given our topic today, which is, Indigenous ways of knowing and doing. Thinking about our new curriculum, grades 4 to 6. And we're going to focus on ELAL. However, your question could be about other curriculum or, different subjects as well. And if you're finished, it's always interesting to read other people's questions. We won't get as much time here as Rosalind and I would love to have, but
No, I could probably do this all day. You know that, though.
sorry, I probably flipped just as you were reading, Rosalind. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'm actually looking at it on the other.
Okay, perfect. What's standing out for you, Rosalind, or what do you see some commonalities?
So the two, well, I guess three. One is a list of Indigenous books that you feel are good, authentic. Two, how to embed or weave Indigenous knowledge authentically into your classrooms. Both, like, I think in ELAL, but also I've saw quite a few cross-curricular things, which I think ELAL, I mean, you can do stories, you can do social studies pulled with it. I thought, Kim, you could talk a little bit about small number with the math as well.
Okay, let me write that down. Thank you. It's not integrated in here, but
No, but
okay.
we could just talk as a resource. That could be something. So those are
Okay.
the themes that are standing out to me.
Okay.
I think I talk about this every time, but that underlying fear, I guess, of not knowing or being uncomfortable or unsure of not wanting to do it wrong. I think is there. So
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry, I don't have a lisp, but my whole side of my face is frozen from the dentist this morning. So
Oh
sorry if
no.
I
I
still
did
feel
not
like my
even
tongue is
notice.
thick. So well, there, good. Spoiled it.
Okay, I hate to say this. Please keep typing in your box. And I'm wondering if we even ran out of boxes. Oh my gosh, that would have been, that's terrible. I'm going to paste another one in here and maybe as I turn things over to Roslyn, I will go in and delete some of these because I think these are a repeat. I'm gonna have to be careful with that. Anyways, okay, so thank you. As I said, even if we don't get to your specific request today, know that it impacts future planning for PD. So thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to move on and I'm going to, I noticed we have a great comment here. Carolyn.
How that got in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get it. I might have to just, let's see. Yeah, oh, no.
Anybody know how we could get that comment out there?
It's really
Hey,
powerful. Maybe we should just leave it. I love braided sweetgrass or
I
braided
know.
sweet.
And I was like, the young adult one? Yes, yes, yes. It's
Okay,
great.
maybe there'll be a techie pop in and tell us. I know how it happened, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. Okay, in the name of time, I'm going to keep us going, and I will play with it when I'm not disrupting Rosalind. How about that? It is a great message,
Yeah.
anyhow.
Okay, I think it may be an annotation on the screen.
Yes, okay, that's exactly. Let me see if I can delete
Thank
annotate.
you. I don't know how to
Oh,
pronounce the
clear.
name, but
Clear
thank
all
you.
drawings. Yeah, I did it. Thank
Yay!
you. Who was that? Lana. No.
I don't know how to pronounce the name, so I don't want to. I always feel I don't want to butcher people's names. So, oh
No
yeah, no
worries.
worries. Okay, okay, okay. So, this is kind of we did this a lot in our division when we were talking about the new curriculum coming into play a couple of years ago. Was this pre-assessment of how comfortable do you feel with the new curriculum. So I've kind of taken that and used it in this regard as well. But as a pre-assessment, when you're thinking about your own knowledge base, how comfortable are you in your understanding of Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being? So just you as an individual, would you say you're a seed, a sprout, a sapling, or a tree? Now, before you put that in the chat, just give me 1 second. I think it's worth noting that a lot of the research, this is one of the areas that I focus on in my master's a lot. A lot of educators are very apprehensive about weaving Indigenous ways of knowing into their classrooms, and they're not comfortable with their foundational knowledge for a multitude of reasons. But a lot of it has to do with, your own schooling. How much were you taught about it? And also where you lived, where you grew up, culture, all of those things. So this, you being here, I do feel like I need to validate that this is your own act of reconciliation. You are wanting to build your foundational knowledge. You're wanting to figure out what's your relationship like with Indigenous people, and how can you as an educator strengthen your role in that. So there are a ton of foundational knowledge resources that are out there that we can get you started with. There are a lot at the end of the slides that are linked there, so I won't go into that in detail, but there's a few key ones at the end that are a great place to start. So if you could, in the chat, just say seed, sprout, sapling, or tree in your own personal understanding of Indigenous ways of knowing and doing and being. Whoa, I can't keep up.
Somebody added like a little image of a sprout or a cedar tree.
Whoa, cool. Sprout, sapling, sprout, seeds, sprout, seed, sprout. That's my squeaky chair. Sorry. I need an office chair. Okay. And I think it's great when educators are open and honest with themselves. It's a vulnerability piece for sure, to state, this isn't an area that I need to grow in, which I think, a tree is a perfect representation of that. But I think it's worth noting that some people have said, like, I'm a seed that wants to go in the ground. Like that's where I am. And I think as long as we acknowledge that there is a multitude of areas to grow, um, and being kind with ourselves and being respectful of our relationship with Indigenous people, I think that's great. I think that shows great respect and responsibility there. So, okay, thank you for participating in that. That kind of gives us a little bit of knowledge. So, Kim, if you want to advance that slide for me, that would be
For sure. And I think something that's coming up in the chat a couple times is just the more information that's shared or that I learn, the more I need to know, or the more I feel I still need to learn. So I loved that one of our sessions, someone said, sometimes I'm a sapling or I feel like a sapling, or maybe even getting towards a tree, and then I bounce back to seed again. So we know learning is not linear, right? So we're going to be doing those jumps back and forth. And I thought that was such a good point.
Oh, is there one in between here?
Oh, my apologies. I maybe got click happy. There we
Okay.
go. Sorry.
I was like, oops, maybe I missed it. But all right. So I love this visual representation because to me, this is really what we're trying to do in this session is we're trying to take a Western worldview as our curriculum, our new curriculum, and Indigenous picture books that have an Indigenous worldview. And we're trying to fit the two puzzle pieces kind of together. And oftentimes when we're doing that, it's called a two-eyed seeing approach. And if you haven't heard about that, it's this idea that you're trying to provide not equal, but you're trying to respect both knowledge systems and both worldviews and look through two eyes with that so that you're seeing the value of both in your classroom. And in the slide itself, in the speaker notes, there's a little bit more about that. But there's some questions there in the speaker notes that I think are worth grappling with a little bit as a teacher. I know in my master's work, there's been times where even even as a Métis person, even I have found certain aspects of my teaching very colonized. And so then it's been a reflective process for me to look at. One of the questions is, what is knowledge and how do you understand and define what's considered knowledge? And what types of knowledge do you value in your classroom? And when I thought about that, I was like, I mean, I have taught primarily high school. So the curriculum to me was, I mean, there's that diploma at the end. Like that was a big, big deal. That's the kind of knowledge I valued. And having, to critically reflect on that and look for avenues of which I could embrace a more Indigenous worldview and approach, I guess, pedagogy and the practices. It takes time. It's not something that you can just, well, I guess you could do it real quickly, but I'm not sure how long lasting that would be. It might be very overwhelming if you were to do it all. So that's that slide. And then the next one, if you want to click to that, this, I didn't come up with this. This is Donna Ross from CRC. And she had shared this, and she did a three-part series last fall, I think, called Weaving Indigenous Ways of Knowing into the New Curriculum. And it was a great series for me as well, but just this idea that oftentimes we as teachers get really focused in on the curriculum, which is our responsibility, but then we sometimes don't look at how an Indigenous knowledge system can add to that. And it can build bridges and it can make deeper connections for students. And I think one of the key things some teachers maybe grapple with or don't understand is Indigenous knowledge systems. Now, Indigenous groups are different, right? Your First Nations, your Inuit, and your Métis are different. And within those, there'll be cultural location differences. But generally speaking, most Indigenous knowledge systems have three key components, and those are that they're more holistic. They're not going to look at math on its own or science on its own. They're going to look at how do those all connect together in a more holistic way. So I know lots of you had talked about how can I do more curricular or cross-curricular, and that's using an Indigenous lens And really having those relationships with your Indigenous people in your area can help you with looking for, where can I build those connections? Where can I make this more holistic for students? Um, not Indigenous knowledge systems are also more relational, so they really focus on, how are things impacting each other, how are we impacting the earth, how's the earth impacting us, animals. Or I was at the CAS Start Right conference, and one of the presenters was Inuit, and she talked about animals as her more than living friends, and like the earth and the plants and all that. And I was like, more than living, like, that's just a different way of phrasing that when we talk about trees or rocks or rivers or whatever, like, to us, we have names for them, but that's just our more than living friends. Like, it just was a more impactful or respectful term that I thought was really spoke to that relationship piece. And then more collaborative. So oftentimes we like to focus on what the individual student knows. We report on what an individual student knows, and that's our job. But also, when we look at Indigenous knowledge systems, they couldn't survive individually. They were very much a collective group. And without that collective group, there would be death. So that collaborative nature, that almost forced survival mechanism, really shaped needing that connection and needing that collaboration where people can voice and connect and share their ideas. Um, and so just incorporating more time for conversation, more time for discussion, more time for sharing ideas. That doesn't necessarily mean, take away the individual assessment. It means also valuing that time where students are doing that collaborative work. And I think, if anything, the research is showing from the pandemic that we've become more restrictive on that. We didn't have the opportunity to be collaborative and connect. And so we really need to build those skills in the students moving forward. So that's kind of what I'm going to say about this slide. I probably talked too much about it anyway, but there's a link there to, if you are a seed and you want to build some foundational knowledge, the Weaving Ways by Empowering the Spirit is a phenomenal site to go and visit. They also have a whole section on there for Beyond Orange Shirt Day that can strengthen your reconciliation understanding, especially with September coming up. Maybe something to consider.
Thank you, Rosalind. I think you could spend a whole session on that, the previous two slides, but thank you so much for embedding it in this session. It's just so important. But to continue with Rosalind's mention of two worldview, it was interesting because the team doing the Institute this week, so the other presenters and myself, got together and we started talking about what you would be thinking about as a teacher in terms of the new curriculum. And one of the things that came up were classroom routines. And, classroom routines, even though they're not changing like the curriculum they are very important to allow you to engage in the curriculum with your students. So we started brainstorming. So we started talking about some things like, how to ask for help and access to class materials and attendance and bell routines and, what about goal setting? And, and then in my work that I've had the privilege of working with Rosalind and Donna Ross, and I started thinking, oh my goodness, these are Western world views of routines. And so Rosalind shared this really incredible article, and I believe that the link in the speaker notes will take you to the article. It's called it's the Native Ethics and Rules of Behavior. Let me just check on that, the name of
Yeah,
it.
that's the name.
There. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's right at the top here, and then I put a link to the article. It is incredible. And so what we did, and I'll just speak to this briefly, and then I'll let Rosalind obviously share, but so if we think about this concept of class routines, again, being Western worldview, what if we think of it in terms of Indigenous worldviews? And some of the ideas that came from the article were this the concept of non-competitiveness. Okay, so non-competitiveness, if we're having some, the first one to line up when the bell rings, right? So it's just, these are very thought-provoking, obviously. This idea of Indigenous worldviews of sharing and a native concept of time and the practice of teaching by modeling. We're going to look at student and teacher goal setting through Medicine Wheel as we move through our session. So I'll leave that one. But Rosalind, did you want to speak to this? I thought this was fascinating.
Yeah, this was actually an article one of my professors had shared with us in a First Nation Métis Inuit issues in school leadership. And when I read it, I just thought, holy cow, like, yeah, and I think when I reflected on it for myself, the biggest thing really is that if whether or not you have Indigenous students in your classroom, okay, that to me that's not a thing of whether or not you should do this because I think a lot of these ideas are found in a multitude of cultures, and as an act of reconciliation, I think it's good that we try to expand and reflect and explore other knowledge systems and how we can bring those into a richer classroom. I mean, I'm a social studies teacher by trade, so the idea of multiple perspectives and understanding them and respecting them is key and pivotal in society. So I really want to emphasize that I think it's really about teachers getting to know their students. And this article for me and possibly for you will help you really think about how these kids are growing up in a different system than maybe you have. And really thinking about when they come into your classroom, is there going to be a culture shock, or is it kind of like a soft place to land? And that not in a critical way. I don't want to sound like you're doing something wrong, but it's that deeper work as a teacher as to how inclusive it is, how equitable is it for kids in your classroom. And I think the longer I've taught, the more I've come to question and challenge myself on that, on how well am I doing that. So I think there's a lot of speaker notes on that I tried to kind of pull a little bit from the article if you want. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, if that's okay.
Thank you, though. That contribution was really helpful. And are there any questions so far? And at the beginning, again, I should have stressed that please pop your questions in the chat. Anything that you're percolating, wondering about, perhaps, it's engaging you in some deeper thinking around a certain topic. We're really interested in hearing, because this is virtual. It's always nice to hear from you. So feel free to pop your comments in the chat.
Or unmute,
Yes.
we've all done the online teaching where no one asks questions. So feel free.
Yes, thank you. That's perfect. Okay, so taking this foundational knowledge, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. Go ahead, Rosalind.
I think I just put this in here. I thought the visual was really neat. And it was just, once again, looking at responsive schooling approaches and Aboriginal worldviews and perspective, and how they can kind of connect, and they're interconnected, I should say, and that relationship between the two. So that's all I'm going to say about that. If you want to know more, check it out.
Yeah, no, I really like this graphic organizer, like in terms of the way it's organized. And yeah, they're fantastic. They're fantastic resources to keep and refer back to as well as you move along. So I did mention earlier that I was going to share a little bit about using the medicine wheel as a means or a vehicle, as a amazing foundation for goal setting with students, or goal setting as yourself, yourself as an educator. Christine Malott, you'll see her picture in the upper right-hand corner. She created some online webinars, and I put the link to those again in the speaker notes. You're thinking, there's a lot in the speaker notes, ladies. Yeah, so again, it's just for if you want to go deeper, they're there. But I thought this was fascinating. I'm a huge advocate of student goal setting. And I really liked the way that she talked about goal setting in terms of getting things, getting students to think about emotional goals and spiritual goals, physical goals, mental wellness goals, you know? So I thought that that was really well laid out. This is only one example and one way that you might think about doing this. And Rosalind, did you want to add to
I think
this in any way?
I just kind of want to harken. Wow. Okay. Anyway, I just want to go back to those questions that you had brought, or the group had brought forward. And it was, how could we embed Indigenous ways of knowing and doing in meaningful ways? And I think one of the things, like when we talk about a two-eyed seeing approach, the curriculum and the outcomes are going to be your Western one. But when we think about what kind of goal setting does the child as a whole want to accomplish, we can really start to expand that a little bit. And you're like, oh, do I have to assess that? No, it's not about assessing. It's about really valuing not just the intellectual growth of the child, which we argumentally and validly put a lot of focus on, but they're not just little vessels that we fill with knowledge, and so sometimes branching that out to look at different ways, that the child can grow and what's their goal, like really asking kids that is awesome, I think. So, okay, who asked this question? Our class.
Great question.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I do think and that article will speak to that we had shared there. There's not a lot of reward systems traditionally in Indigenous cultures. I can't speak for a lot, but I mean, growing up as a Métis person, I didn't get rewarded because, I did my chores or I did this. That wasn't something that was intrinsic in there. So I think sometimes when we do the extrinsic reward systems in classrooms, sometimes that really does breed that competitiveness, which is really counter culture essentially to Indigenous students. So I do think, like, when we talk about, for me, I love the sacred teachings or the grandfather teachings, where we really, as a group, we look at what are the things that we value in our classroom and how can we as a group be respectful and support one another moving forward in class, and really try to ground the classroom in that rather than in the reward system, which I mean, I can't say as a secondary teacher exactly what. I think I would have certain ideas on how I could do that in 4 to 6, but I think it would be really looking at what are your classroom values and really thinking about how can you encourage more collaboration and connection rather than the individual competitiveness or reward system, which I fully understand, especially from the pandemic, that kids need structure, and sometimes that reward system really helps or has helped some kids get back in the groove of school, and that's a thing that a lot of teachers in our division are struggling with. So I don't want to say that that's like a silver bullet, like that's going to solve everything, but I think it might be worth the effort, if that helps answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ideas, Kim? Sorry.
No, I think what you said, I love the collaborative mention, right? And I do believe that it's being mindful of it. So I don't think the suggestion is, no more competition, no more, right? It's that two-eyed seeing. So you're being mindful of both views. And but no, the collaborative, the other you talked about having, oh, the holistic. So that whole, as we're taking care of ourselves, we can also be thinking about how we taking care of others around us. Lana, you have your hand up.
Actually, just listening to you too about this medicine wheel and goal setting, it makes me think about start of the year, getting to know your students, getting to know your teacher, all of that kind of stuff. You could totally see some time spent on you personally as a teacher, looking at your emotional goals, spiritual goals, physical goals throughout the year, but modeling for your students what that could look like. Wonderful activity to start out the year and getting to know each other and set the climate for that classroom for the year. Love it. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I like, especially as like school leaders, like getting to know your staff and getting to know your teacher and who you are as a teacher. Like we could be at varying degrees in our career, and our goals and our pedagogy and practice look very different sometimes. And so it's a nice reflective practice, I think, sometimes. So thanks, Lana.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in? Lana set the stage, modeling. If anyone wants to share, feel free. So interesting to hear from you. All right. So, Roslyn, before we jump into our literature aligned with the curriculum, we did want to talk about, I liked how Rosalind, she sent me the cover, actually a link to this book. And she said, this book is for good for all the curriculum, all the levels. And so I thought it was a great segue into the portion where we'll go more into the application. So all creation represented by Lynn, can you say that for me, Rosalind? Perot. And I'm not doing a great job. And the illustrations are beautiful. And but did you want to speak to that book a little bit more?
I think Perot. Oh, somebody's giving me lessons here. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Perot. Thank you.
Perot. So this is a Anishinaabe or Ojibwe author. And so if there's one tidbit that I can give you advice for, it's if you're going to use Indigenous literature in your classroom, make sure the author is Indigenous. That's always that's like your first and foremost. And try to locate where they are and share that information with your students. I think that's key. I think that's a great way of building that respect and that relationship, and know your groups in your area. But this book, yeah, when I ordered it in for our IMC, I was just like, I was just showing it to everybody in division office, I think. And I just think it's so great because it does really talk a lot about that whole idea of being holistic, but the relationship piece is so key. And then it talks just about like the colors, the seasons, the stages of life, the balance. Like it covers so many things. And I think it's a great, yeah, it's just a phenomenal book. And in the speaker notes I listed, or I think I linked a school division out of BC. They have a great medicine wheel kind of lesson, but it's more than a lesson kind of activity there that you could use in coordination with this book. So yeah, I just get really excited about books. So that's why Kim and I get along.
It's true. Okay, so we aren't going to do an official break, but what I've learned when I'm in webinars is I turn off my camera and go and move. So please move when you need to, go get some more water. You can still hear and you have access to the slides. So please keep yourself healthy. We're going to move into the next section. So take all that beautiful foundational knowledge and we're going to move into the more application side of things. And oh, excellent, Carolina, I hope I'm saying that right. If you have any books that you want to share, please share them in the chat. And the one thing I learned from Rosalind, and there's a good story behind that, is Indigenous authors and the value and importance of that. So again, we'll be sharing lots of books as we go. So I want to start by giving credit to two early learning consultants with the Calgary Catholic School District, Kayla Lake and Jane Pollock, and they were the ones that introduced me to this way of using the new Alberta curriculum and picture books and aligning them together to create really robust instruction and learning. So I am going to be really upfront that Kayla and Jane, we met when the first K-3 ELAL curriculum was launched, and we were going into a room to meet with a big group of kindergarten teachers, and Kayla and Jane came in and they were just like stacks of picture books and they were teetering all over the place, and they put them on the table and they said, this is where we're going to start. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So they decided that they would embed the curriculum through mentor text. So I am sure that all of you are shaking your head. Yes, mentor text, but I'll just, share so we're all coming from the same place. Mentor texts are books that model for students what good readers and writers do. So I love this part, the craft and skills involved in reading and writing, right? So that they can experience both. And it also gives students an authentic real world experience of different kinds of writing and really a way that they can travel the world without moving from their comfy reading chair or a comfy reading spot. So that was something that they started with this group. And then we as a collective talked briefly about Rudine Sims Bishop and her work around mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And I hope you'll bear with me. I just want to read a very brief section from Rudine Sim Bishop's an article that she wrote. And it is linked here if you want to read the whole article. But she talks about books are sometimes windows offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created or recreated by the author. So I love that whole windows and then sliding glass doors for them to walk in. And then the next level would be when learning conditions are just right, however, and I love that segue, a window can be a mirror. Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of a larger human experience. So I love this analogy. And I think that today in our session that we're doing, along with the other sessions this week, really reflect this, engaging students in mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors.
Can I just jump in for 1 sec?
Yes, you can
Can you
always
go back
jump
to that
in.
slide just for a second?
Yes, please.
And I think this is, like, I don't want to overstate it, but some of your students, if they are First Nation, Métis, or Inuit, they may or they may not have encountered literature that is a mirror. Growing up, I never saw a book that reflected who I was. And so sometimes I think that's important, that that equitable piece of literature is can be really powerful. And I know a lot of teachers, especially around September, they choose books for Truth and Reconciliation, but sometimes they wonder how come that didn't resonate, or how come there's these intense emotions that come out of it. But sometimes it is because when you encounter a mirror and it brings stuff up or it doesn't bring stuff, it can be a lot to digest. So really just being aware of that when you're choosing your literature, or just knowing that that can be not necessarily a trigger, but it can really evoke that emotional response in students. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Great addition. Okay, so what we're going to do now is move into the ELAL learning outcome map concept. So this concept we're using today, we're really taking taking a view from Indigenous ways of knowing and doing. You can integrate Indigenous ways of knowing and doing in this way in math, in science, in social studies. We chose to start with ELAL. So just so you know, it's very transferable. We'll start with grade 4, and when I flip to the next slide, I certainly hope it doesn't cause anxiety. We've put a lot on the slide, but it's definitely not something that is to be done all at one time. So to start, we took the grade 4 ELAL curriculum, and this map is just showing the learning outcomes. So each green bubble is a different learning outcome. And we did number them here, even though in the curriculum they are not numbered. We did number them here just to kind of keep track of which ones we were pulling. So this blank template is for you to use and create your own mind maps. So something that we do want to add in is starting with an engaging opener. So before I share the book that we're going to do today, we'll just do a quick little activator to get students percolating and thinking about some predictions of what the book might be about. So we are going to do the picture book, The Giving Tree by Leah Dorian. And I love that it has a mischief. Say that for me, Rosalind, please. See, this is where Rosalind is such a Mitchiff translation by Norman Fleury. And Rosalind, again, is always amazing. Say Kim, okay? Or I can repeat it. So please, it's about risk taking and making sure that you're just being respectful and asking, and that's what I've learned. So, okay, so we're going to just use, and this is covered on purpose, so if you're in the slide deck, try not to bring this gray slide to the side just yet, and I'm just going to do a brief version of this activation activity. But you can pick some key words, and you see on the side here, I've chosen 4. So these are coming from, it's called visualizing and verbalizing. It's an approach that you can use to engage your students in visualizing. And I'm just pulling a few of the pieces here. So I chose size and shape as sort of some key words, structure words, and mood and sound. So what I'm going to do is just give you a really overview description of this picture that I'm going to show you. And it's going to be very big picture because we don't have the time for me to get into nitty-gritty details. But what I would love you to visualize, if you can, and some people like to close their eyes, you keep your eyes open, is I'd like you to visualize a tree. So I'm talking like a big stoic tree with the trunk is very visible. And you'll notice with my hands that I do a lot of gesturing, and actually the research around comprehension really supports using gesturing. Like gesturing is really a powerful mechanism for you to observe students and their understanding, because if they can gesture size, if they can gesture shape, they're really sharing their comprehension with us, and even for their own development. So this tree is really big and robust, and in front of the tree, I'd like you to picture what I view as 2 parents and a child. And in the center of the tree is a big black hole. And when I say big black hole, I don't think like space black hole. I think like I want to go in their black hole. Like it's mysterious, but it's inviting. And there's something about the black hole that entices and draws me to this tree. So again, I've done a very basic sort of overview. So what I would have the students do is I would describe it to them, and then I would say, okay, I want you to turn to someone beside you and talk about the size of the tree that you see in your mind. Talk about the shape that you see in your mind. What are you visualizing? What's the mood? Right? And kids might say, how do you know the mood? It's a picture. Well, you say, you take clues from the picture to create a mood. So is it sad? Is it a happy picture? Is it like they're surprised? Like you could have lots of words that they could choose from. And the final one are sounds. What sounds would you hear if you were beside this tree? Oh, I would hear birds chirping, or I would hear the wind rustling the leaves. So this is kind of a neat activation activity that you can do to get students thinking about the book, and some clues they can take away. So as I said, general description. And so you can remove then and kind of show them the picture, and then they can turn and talk with each other about, oh, did you see that? Did you see what's on the cover of the book? Or did your picture look different? How was it different? Tell me how it was different from what you saw. And these are great developmental strategies that you can use to develop visual images for students. And we know visualization helps comprehension. So this is where Rosalind's like, okay, Kim, you're steering way too much into that deep literacy piece. I'm sorry. Okay, so.
No, I didn't think that at all.
Because sometimes I get down that rabbit hole. Lana's smiling, she knows. So that's a great activation activity. And so then you could introduce the book. So we're going to be reading The Giving Tree, a retelling of a traditional Métis story, and then talk about the authors, and that it is written in 2 languages. And that's what makes this book even stronger. So this was the slide where I was saying, I hope that we don't overwhelm you. But what we did is we chose 4 learning outcomes. And we put the learning outcomes still in green. And then underneath the learning outcomes, we've brought in cusps that would relate to that learning outcome that are addressed in the book. So cusps standing for, and we talked about this in the session yesterday, but if you weren't here, knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. So we chose, 1, we're not putting every cusp for every learning outcome. We're pulling, and this is part of a really great technique that you can use with the new curriculum, is you don't feel like you have to, it's not a checklist, right? You can bring and pull these cusps and learning outcomes together in really natural, authentic ways. So in terms of the Giving Tree, the recording is attached to the book there. If you click on it, I think it's also in the speaker notes if you just want to listen to the book as a teacher beforehand. But this is just such a beautiful story, which I think a lot of us have read over the years. But I love, and Rosalind and I used to go through each of these, and we were like, no, all of you can pick and choose which ones you're interested in. I do want to highlight one piece, and then I'll turn it over to Rosalind because I know she always has great contributions to this area. But we had a teacher in a previous session, and I actually just added it to the speaker notes, who left this message at the end. And she said, I'm still wondering how we can learn from the land and how that's different from learning on, about, and with the land. So I right away said to Rosalind, the Giving Tree would be a beautiful way that you could do that. Because we are going to engage the students in thinking about respect, relationships, between people. So they're travelers who go by this beautiful tree are leaving gifts inside the tree, and then taking things that they may need, but they're doing this beautiful exchange of supporting each other through a nature, vehicle, which I think is so beautiful. But and having conversations about what is your relationship with the land. And right now, I won't divert into that, but there's so much happening with the land and with earth. And so I just see so many beautiful opportunities here. So Rosalind, did you want to talk about any of those specific ideas?
So I guess for that question that the teacher brought up, it was I think I had brought it up in a session that there was Warren Wojcik. I don't know if any of you know him. He works for TC Squared, but he really brought my attention to this more holistic way of looking at land-based learning through, and he worked with a bunch of First Nation groups in Ontario, and a lot of the elders said, like, it's not just about like learning about the land. You need to be on the land, you need to be with the land, and you need to learn from the land. And I think one of the key things is when we're learning from the land, recognizing that Indigenous people historically, that is how they learned. There wasn't a book or a school where they went to go get knowledge or retrieve knowledge and skills from. It was that learning process, holistic learning process that occurred on the land. So when we say from the land, it's what's the lessons that the land are teaching us, but then how are we improving that relationship ourselves? So what are we doing so the earth can continue to thrive, right? So when we're talking about whether that's environmentalism or sustainability or those kind of connections as well. So there are a couple links there in the speaker notes that you might want to look at. I mean, braiding sweetgrass is a great resource, I think, for teachers. And if you find, or if maybe, I know some teachers that have read Braiding Sweetgrass and they're like, oh, okay, like it was heavy for me. Like it was just like a lot. And I think if that's maybe you, when it's like something different or new, the young adult version is also phenomenal. It's not that it doesn't have the same material. It does. It's just it would really, like, if there's visuals, there's more quotes, it's just a little bit easier read, I guess, is how I would put it, and with that same concepts. So if you want to check, and if you've never heard of Braiding Sweetgrass, I mean, I adore the book, but it's, I don't know how to, like, it's the Indigenous wisdom, science, plants, and trying to really share that with the world. And I probably butchered that explanation of that, but it's just a great idea on how you can expand your own knowledge of Indigenous ways of knowing. So there's that book linked. CAS, the Alberta College of School Superintendents, has a great site for learning from the land that's available to teachers. So feel free to dig into that. For this book itself, I love it. I mean, I read it to my kids all the time. Plus it's Métis, so I love it. But we don't necessarily have the Anishinaabe have the grandfather teachings. I know there's Blackfoot values. So where you are in relationship to the land will kind of dictate what you can tell the kids. And if you don't know where you are on the land, then that's where you need to start. You need to know who are the groups, what treaty land are you on, what Métis region are you on, or district that's changing now. Where are you, what groups are there? That's your foundational work that you need to have to share with students about these books or these ideas. So I think that's good to know, and then you can really branch into that learning piece about the land and from the land and whatnot, which is kind of daunting to some teachers, I think, but you don't need to go about it in a huge way. You can find, and you can start with the literature if you want. But this book itself, I love the theme of reciprocity, which I think is I mean, it's one of our core values in Métis culture, but it's also, I know, one in a number of other ones. And so that idea that you're not going to take more than you need, and you're going to always give back, so that that relationship is maintained and it's balanced and harmonious. And so I think that's a really great theme to explore with students when you're talking about, you know, as a child grows up, like really having that idea of what does a good relationship look like with yourself, with other people, with the earth. And so that idea of reciprocity, especially reconciliation, I mean, there's so many avenues and cross-curricular connections you can make with this book, that I think would be phenomenal. I would absolutely do this with science or social studies for sure. I
Mhm.
don't know, I'd have to think about the math, but I'm sure I could figure out a way to do it. But so yeah, I think I could talk about this too much, so cut me off.
Yeah, I didn't even tell Rosalind, I don't think yet, but a teacher who had taken the session before said that she read the book to her students, and engaged in some of these ideas that are here with the learning outcomes. And then she had them go out and select what they felt was a giving tree.
Oh,
So, what criteria would you look for in a tree that would lend itself to being a giving tree? And I was like, right? So good. So just all the extensions that come from percolating, on one idea, and then kind of take it away. Any questions, comments, wonderings?
I think it's worth noting at the back of this book they have like a wheel of Métis values. So it's kind of neat. So if you are doing like a social studies group or lesson or whatnot, this would I can't remember what grade this is. I think it's still in grade 5 social studies that they're talking about. Is it the landforms, geography, those kind of things, the groups, the stories? Because I know I worked with some grade 5 teachers in our division this past year, and we really looked at how Métis and Blackfoot really, their connection with their land, their stories with the land, and you could use this book as one of those pieces in social studies as well. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so that was our one book we chose for grade 4. Obviously, there's many options, but we thought again this would be a great book to start the year. And Len had mentioned that before about the start and the beginning of the year, and this, building relationships that are one where you are giving, and receiving, that collaborative spirit. So
And
love.
building that community in your classroom, right? Like, what does a community of learners look like? And getting them to create, or what is a community? What are the criteria of a community? And really getting them to think about that, and then that could launch you into a lot of critical thinking for a lot of different areas. But okay, so this, I am not taking credit for this. This was some work that our division did with one of our Blackfoot elders and one of our Blackfoot liaisons from Siksika. So they have created essentially a Blackfoot medicine wheel there. And then I believe, yes, it's
I'm
linked.
gonna
Okay.
go back and I can go into it. Oh,
I think it's just linked there. Yeah.
there, right here. Okay.
Yeah, and so this is a separate presentation. I've tried to be very explicit of who the credit for the PowerPoint and the YouTube playlist goes to. So Joni Breaker was liaison and Daryl Breaker was the elder. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's 11:40, but if you're looking for resources for medicine wheel teachings, or whether you call them sacred teachings or grandfather teachings, this slide here has a link to our division's YouTube page, and each grandfather teaching, our elder has spoken and shared his understanding of it with in like little snippets, like I think they're 2 to 3 minutes, and then each slide kind of breaks this down, each teaching. So the grandfather teachings traditionally are Anishinaabe or Ojibwe, farther east in Ontario, and so some of these are slightly different. I shouldn't say slightly different, but this is a Blackfoot understanding of those teachings. So I think it's important to note, I don't know who made that comment in there about like don't just say Indigenous everything, because different groups will have different values or different teachings that are important. And it's not that you can't use them, but it's recognizing whose land you're on and what their values are. And then if you are going to use the Anishinaabe grandfather teachings, recognizing that those aren't traditionally from the land that you're on, and trying to see a connection maybe with the territory that you are on, or building that understanding, or what do they do here versus that. So I think that's just a more respectful way of doing it, instead of just being like, oh, we're gonna do the sacred teachings today. I mean, I don't know where they're from, but they're good. Like, like it's just building that understanding for yourself. So anyway, feel free to use this if you would like.
And I like the little videos, like you said, on each of these, like respect, love, humility. Like there's a little video on each slide. And just so that everybody knows, you can access that slide deck by the hyperlink down here at the bottom of the medicine wheel. It says copy of medicine wheel teachings.
It's also in the speaker notes.
Speaker notes, yeah. Perfect. Okay, so I will speak to this briefly because again, our time always flies. But one thing that we want to keep in mind again is just thinking about assessment. And I know that we've been talking about two-eyed seeing. So we want to make sure, that we're thinking about assessment, not only from a Western worldview. And I would say that the example I've here would lean more toward the Western worldview. But this is just an idea to create some look for sheets. And it was interesting. We were doing sessions at Ambrose University, and I said, you could print these out and you could put them on clipboards. And the students put up their hand. They said, can we use iPads? And I said, okay, yeah, that's speaking volumes right there. So you could use an iPad, you could do a paper pencil, but this is the idea of taking your curriculum. So in this case, we did grade 4 ELAL and science as interdisciplinary connections. And then the book that we chose was The Giving Tree. And what we were focusing on was, as the learning outcome, was students examine how form and structure of text can support the ideas and communication of ideas and information. And very specifically, as ACUSP, we're going to walk around the room during an experience with the book, and we're going to see if students can name a character in the book and classify them as major or minor. And then you could just be putting initials in the boxes to just kind of help you to know who's moving along in the right direction on this cusp, who needs a little bit more support. And then you'll see at the end, squished is a beyond, because every time we show this, somebody says, well, what about those that need a challenge or need to be stretched a bit? So you could add a column in there too, but that's just one way. But we thought we would share it in terms of the new curriculum, and one easy kind of way that you could look at assessing and guiding who is able to, or knowledgeable, who is developing their skills and procedures as you move along with the learning outcomes in the book. So I'm looking at the time, and so this is why we took some more time to set the stage, because our grade 5 book that we chose, and I think this engaging opener is very straightforward and simple, but very deep. The book Shishi Etgo by Nicola I. Campbell is very moving. So the countdown concept is to have your students think of a time in their life that they've counted down. Turn and talk to someone about a countdown. How did the countdown make you feel? What do you remember about the countdown? What was going on around you? So kind of thinking about this concept of counting down to something. as a way to spark conversation about this particular book. And you will see this book listed at lower grade levels when Rosalind shares her resources. And I believe it transcends, and I'm looking at Rosalind virtually to say that she would agree that, it is very much a book about, a young girl and counting down the days until, that she's going to be taken to residential school. And so that countdown concept, and I love how it was integrated in here. And I'm madly looking around because we integrated that idea of talking about countdowns. Oh, yes. So under our learning outcome number 4, so analyze information, context, and perspectives using a variety of comprehension strategies. Have students ever counted down to something? What were the feelings associated with it, right? So that was one piece that we integrated in, but it's historical fiction. We've encompassed oral storytelling, this idea of poetry, right? So you could integrate poetry to demonstrate the importance. And I love when Rosalind put place, home, love, belonging, culture, so many Rosalind additions to this book.
I think it's just, it is one of those books where if you're not quite sure how much your students know about residential schools, it's one of those books that could be a gentle introduction, because it really is just about belonging and home and love, and that almost that building that fear that might be lost. Like, it doesn't go into any detail or anything like that, but there's a lot of avenues at which you could go there. And I think especially with poetry, I mean, like the imagery alone in the book is phenomenal. And you could, I think one of the greatest things with the imagery piece is that you can go out into nature and they could speak to a place that is strong for them, or they could tie in an acknowledgement to that place, to that land, that would make it more personal to them. Like, there's just a lot of opportunities with this book that aren't just about residential schools. But I mean, I think it's important to note that that's what she's counting down for, and that's what kids would really it's not that they would really connect to that piece, but they know when they're excited to count down to something, and they know when they're not excited to count down to something. We've all had that moment of like, mom's going to be home and I'm going to have to tell her that, we broke this because we were fighting, or, like they'll have a real personal connection to something like that. So
yeah, so we've got about 12 minutes. And again, the connections are here. This is one version. This is one brainstorm. It would be amazing to see how this would extend and grow and develop given a school, using and implementing it. So I'll turn things over to Rosalind. She has some great additional resources to share. Was this me?
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to link something in the chat. Okay, I got it, I think. So, all right. So for this, I don't know how many of you have seen or heard of Our Way is a Valid Way. It's a resource. It's been around for a long time. I don't even know, 2008, 2010, somewhere in there. But either way, it is a phenomenal resource if you're kind of starting on that. And in each section, or there's different sections, and this one particular section that I thought could be applied for our books here is that idea of oral traditions and storytelling. And so really looking at culturally responsive teaching, that whole idea of equitable, inclusive, holistic strategies that are more approachable for all students. And then really those strategies there, that in each of the sections in this resource, they have classroom strategies. So you could invite in a storyteller, you could study certain novels, you could do role playing, you could use storytelling in the classroom of finding voice. Like, there's really applicable applications that are there that you could use. So that's just one of them that I think would be great. If you are new to your area and you don't know how to get in contact with the Indigenous group that is in your area, I would start with your principal And then I would, if they're not sure, which they should be sure, but if they're not, if you have people at division office or central office, they can also help make those connections, because sometimes they'll have specific elders that they connect to, or knowledge keepers or whatnot. So that would be a great place to start there. So don't feel scared about reaching out to them. So that would be my advice there. Oh yeah, books. Okay. Are we talking about grade 6?
Well, I'm just sharing the template,
Okay.
and then we'll move to your link of links, your
Okay.
resources here. So you just want me to click on it?
Sure. So this is part of the work that I did with my school division, Golden Hills, was to essentially strengthen our Indigenous resource collection for our teachers. So you may or may not have these books, but this is hopefully something that you could use. A lot of our teachers were nervous about how do I pick a book? How do I select a book? How do I know if it's authentic? Those kind of things. So if you, just scroll up a little bit more, Kim. No, sorry, down.
No. Okay.
Wrong way. So what we did, we have our Indigenous committee, and we decided the vetting there, we were going to assist teachers in how they could select Indigenous. I shouldn't say, it's not that we want them to direct them, we just want them to think of certain things when they go to pick up an Indigenous book. And so one was, what level of foundational knowledge do you need to be able to use this book? What are the potential ripple effects of using this book? What's the foundational knowledge that students need to have when they're going to read this book, and your local context considered? So what's the connection with the area? Do you need elders and knowledge? Who can you reach out to? So those are our criteria. And then part of my work was, if you scroll down page 37, I believe, is that what we said? Page
Yeah, I think so.
37 is where Division 2 starts. If you teach Division 1 to Division 4, there's books here for all those divisions. But Division 2, yeah, just keep going. Oh, look, there's that lovely book that
Yes.
I love so much. So what we've done there, that first column there is what division it's good for, or grade levels. So I've identified Division 2, 3, grades 2 to 7. And then themes is the second column. So, just general terms that I thought were applicable. And then teacher foundational, like the vetting on the side there will tell you what. The blue is those headings, so teacher foundational knowledge needed. So I tried to explain who wrote the book, where they're from, those kind of basic foundational pieces. Did I think there were any potential ripple effects? No or yes. And if they are, I put them in there. What was the student foundational knowledge that they needed? I tried to link some stuff there, and then local context considered there. So depending on the theme, I tried to be as inclusive with the theme, like trying to think just beyond, like, yes, you could use this book for this, but what else could you use it for? So there's, yeah, I don't even know how many pages this is, 64 in total, but it goes to Division 4. So if you teach multiple divisions, maybe that's helpful to you. If not, then just stick with your division, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, and if you
Yes.
don't have these books, then, and this came from me doing a lot of research digging, going through, sites like Empowering the Spirit. They have like a literacy seed kit, and then trying to pull books there, and what books would be good for our region and our treaty area, like just trying to, and what issues keep coming up in our division, and how can we bridge those. So anyway.
Yeah, and don't gasp, Rosalind, but we could create a column where we start to put all our webs that we've created for the books.
Oh, that's a good
She's like,
idea.
Okay, but
Yeah.
we are sharing some of them, but definitely the process is something you could use for any of these books, depending on your goal in terms of the curriculum as you're moving through. So I think I went backwards. So the link here on this page goes to all of Rosalind's references or resources.
So, you know, shout out to my division, Golden Hills, for supporting
Yes,
that work.
yes, huge resource. And then
Okay, so can I just talk 1 minute on this?
yeah,
So the vetting that we created, that was based on our conversation. But if you don't have that in your division or whatever you have, this is like the little visual on the side. This is just great if you're going to use an Indigenous resource in your classroom. It's good to just look at, you know, how these questions here to really guide you in that process. I find it really takes the fear out once you start looking and answering these questions. And if you want some more detailed information, I've put some different guides there to help build your foundational knowledge of how do I select these resources and how do I use them. Because once you have a resource, and maybe you're not in the two-eyed seeing approach, sometimes we'll use the resource, but we'll use it in a more westernized way. And so those links on the side there kind of show you how can you use it and how can you challenge yourself to grow and, you know, extend your practice essentially a little bit. So yeah,
I love that graphic. Amazing.
yeah, me too. I think it's awesome.
Okay, if you didn't have enough resources.
Somebody said they wanted resources and I don't want to disappoint them. So empowering the spirit is linked there. If you, I think one of the greatest and easiest and maybe least used approaches is sharing and talking circles in classrooms, and really how valuable they are to learn how to listen and just how to be respectful and how to be a community, and really set that tone and that mood in your classroom. So that's on the side there. And then there's just like a whole bunch of other resources there that you can check out.
And I wonder if, so maybe this is the way we'll do it, is we have final slides for what are you left wondering? So what's one takeaway from today? What are you left wondering? We realize we only gave you 2 minutes. But the other piece that I'll just go back briefly to post in the chat is Simon Fraser University's Engaging the World Through Math. So for any of you who were asking about how do I align Indigenous ways of knowing and doing and the math curriculum, these are all stories with, and we talked about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors with Indigenous characters, and it provides a little video of the story plus the text. And they are, you know, age appropriate for grade 4 to 6 because there's one on skateboarding, and do you know what I mean? Like they're topics that aren't just K to 3. So I will definitely highlight that one, and I am trying to put it in the chat if anyone else has, maybe because it's so popular I can't copy it. But anyways, thank you, Rosalind. So yeah, so if you have time to stay and give us a bit of, this is what takeaway, wondering, you know, a wondering you're left with, that's always helpful to us too. But thank you so much for your time on a week in August. We are so grateful that you were here to learn with us, and we look forward to seeing you this year at some of our ARPDC Consortia Professional Learning. And yeah, questions, if anyone has a question they want to turn on their mic or put in the chat, we will hold on for a few minutes for that. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, Lana, for being part of our ARPDC team.
Not a problem. I haven't read, someone asked about the Ghost Collector. I have not read that one. So which is silly because I feel like I've read a lot, but I have not read that one. So I don't want to speak to it. I don't want to say sorry about that.
What grade level? I haven't read that one either.
It looks like grade 5 plus. It says age 10
okay.
plus. But
I'm going to read that one. If anybody's read it and wants to talk about it briefly and has a minute, that would be interesting. Wow, it's noon. This is
Yeah, the
did-
Walking Together website, another amazing resource there. Yeah. Phenomenal, that one. I like that one a lot. That was, who said that? Sage? Oh, yeah, I think you were the one that mentioned the Indigenous worldviews and making sure you know what area you're from, which is absolutely essential. You don't want to pan-indigenize anybody. That doesn't usually go over well.
Should I? Oh yeah, okay. I'll add that one. That's a great idea.
I thought we had it in there, but maybe it was in one of the previous.
That's what I'm wondering, but I will make sure it gets back
Yeah.
because that's important.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, thanks everybody. I really appreciate your time. I know it's still the summer. I'm sure you have been in your classrooms probably already. But if you haven't, that's good. We'll be here soon enough. But yes, just want to honor you and say thank you very much. Merci. And that's Mitchell for thank you. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care, everybody. Take care, Rosalind.